What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Pens and Tea. My name is Carrie, and today we're gonna do something that I get questions of from time to time, and I thought, you know what? This is a dope idea. Today we're gonna talk about 5 pens that I used to talk about as like my favorite pens in the past 8 years, and that I don't really mention anymore. So these are pens that I have said repeatedly that they're pretty much my favorite pen. And then all of a sudden something new comes along and that's my favorite pen, and it just sort of goes by the wayside. So these are pens that I used to talk about all the time and don't really talk about very much anymore. Now, I have all 5 of them down here. I still own all 5. I still use all 5. I do talk about them from time to time, but they're not like right in the forefront. So let's just jump into it. Now, one I have talked about a little bit more recently, and the pen that I basically said would never, ever not be my favorite that I could see, which then got replaced by the next pen I'll talk about. And that is the Platinum 3776 Century in Chartreuse Blue. So this is the very first gold nib pen that I ever got. It is a fine nib pen, and it is just gorgeous. I absolutely adore the breather-shaped hole with a plastic feed. This was the first gold nib pen that I ever bought, and I cherish it still for that reason. And it holds a special place in my heart, not only for that, but because it's the only pen in my collection that has a good amount of tooth. So it's not scratchy by any means. Like the tines are smooth, they're perfectly aligned. So it is smooth, but there's a lot of tooth, similar to when you're writing with a really sharp pencil. That kind of feel. And it's the only pen in my collection that has that texture while writing. Because typically I don't like it, but I really do in this one. And when I want that kind of a feeling, this is the pen that I go for. And for that reason, this has been in my collection the longest. It's one of the oldest fountain pens that I own. Because I'm quite frankly, I'm never going to get rid of it. The only way I could ever see myself getting rid of it is if I do end up picking up the tortoiseshell celluloid fountain pen, but I would still get a fine nib on it. That would be the only reason why I would let this one go, because I really only have the need for one 3776 in my life. But I do want to get the tortoiseshell version of this pen. Why don't I talk about it very much anymore? Well, because I have so many pens now, and that's a kind of blanket for all of these pens, is that I have so many pens now to talk about. But this one, because I use it now less frequently than the rest, it just seems to be one that I don't talk about too often, until it comes around to like, my top 10 most favorite pens of all time, or like top 10, that have a special meaning to me or something like that. Then I bust that out. So that was my favorite pen for a long time. Then that got ousted by this guy. This is the Burgundy Aurora Optima fountain pen. It is absolutely stunning. This at one point was the most expensive pen I ever owned. Currently, I have a 18 karat stub nib in here. It is not the nib that came with this pen. The nib that came with this pen, which was part of the reason why it was so special, I actually took out and swapped of a different Aurora that I have, and that was a 14 karat gold nib with a red ebonite feed that has the letter M on it for medium. Now, this is not actually a medium nib. It is a medium fine nib. Reason being is because this is the very first fountain pen I ever purchased that I had a Nibmeister tune and adjust. So this one I purchased from nibsmith.com or Dan Smith, and I purchased just the fine, and I asked him to just do his regular tune and smooth. take away a lot of the feedback, make it write wetter, that kind of thing. He then reached out to me and said, hey, my mistake, I don't actually have any fines in stock, but I do have a medium. Would you like me to grind it down to fine? But it will have the letter M on it, or would you rather wait, several weeks? I think it was like 3 or 4, potentially 5 weeks, until I have some fine nibs in stock. And so I said, you know what? Let's split the difference. Why don't we do a medium fine nib, and then go from there? So that's what I did, and I have absolutely adored this pen since. I still use it from time to time throughout each year. I love the color. It is my favorite color, although to be fair, this one does have a close second there on the color. Like I said, I have a stub nib in it right now, but I just absolutely adore it. And why do I talk about it not as often anymore? Well, I think because I kept getting feedback so much that I was talking about it too much. Which I think is where I'm approaching with my Bennu comments these days. I think you guys are starting to be like, okay, stop talking about that pen. But I can't help it. I'm obsessed. They're so good. So this originally was my favorite for a long time. It got ousted by the Aurora Optima. Again, I still use them both every year. But then I picked up the Lummi 2000. This one I picked up from Wonder Pens in Toronto. And absolutely fell in love with this. There's virtually no adornments to this pen. I mean, it just is. It also has a gold nib, hooded nib, and it is a medium nib. It is quite wet, very smooth. I really, really adore it. I love the way that it fits in my hand. I like the ink window. It fits a good amount of ink. You can post, not post. This is probably one, to be fair, that I'm going to start using more often than I used to, because this is something that I will take to work with me now that I have an office type job, whereas I've never had that in my entire 34 years of life. I've always been on my feet, a runner, just a lot of physical stuff. So never really anything where I would use my pens for. But this is a perfect work appropriate pen. So I'll probably start to use it more often, which means I will likely start talking about it more often. Because spoiler, eventually, when I've been going to this office for a long enough time, I will start making pens that I take to the office with me. This one is still a classic. I do own 2 more now. I have the blue and the brown. I might get rid of the blue and brown. Not because they're not dope, but because I don't need 3 Lummi 2000s. So that's sort of my reasoning behind there. Why have I stopped talking about it? Mostly because everybody pretty much already knows everything there is to know about the Lummi 2000. There's not really anything new that I could teach or reference with the Lummi 2000, because it has been around for so long, and there are like thousands and thousands of reviews on YouTube. I do, by the way, have full reviews of every one of these pens, so if you want to see like full like actual review details, check that out. And then another pen that I purchased from the very first pen show that I ever went to was the Toronto Scriptus Pen Show in 2017 or 18. One of the two. I do not remember which one. And that is the Pelican M805 Streisman. I am obsessed with the Streisman look. I absolutely adore this like gray, silver, chatoyant rods here. This is if we can focus once again, an 18 karat fine nib, although it definitely writes like a fat medium. I purchased this, like I said, from the pen show. It meant a ton to me. I purchased it at the same time as Almas Ogiva Alva Blue Cocktail. I have since let that one go. It's now in the responsible hands of somebody else who loves it and adores it. I loved and adored it too. It's just I never really used it. This one I don't use too often, mostly because it is such a broad writer. But I don't want to let it go, because eventually I do want to have this nib ground down. So even though it is a fine nib, it really does write like a beefy medium. Now, I love the wetness, but I want it to be much finer. So definitely I want to get it ground down probably to what would be considered a Western fine, or potentially somewhere in between a fine and medium for like a Japanese type pen. Because I love the way that it fits in my hand. I like the weight. This is a heavier pen than most that I have, which I'd like to bust out when I want a little bit of weight, or one that I can fill for a really long time. If I can get this ground down, this would also be one that I would take to work with me, because it's just classy. I mean, look at these guys. They're perfect. They're perfect work pens. And it's just super, super reliable. So why do I not talk about this very often anymore? Well, because to be fair, I don't really talk much about Pelican in general anymore. And this is the one pen that I was struggling for the most to find the reason why I stopped talking about it. There's no logical reason. There's no logical reason other than the fact that it doesn't show up on camera super well. But there's no logical reason. And I have done reviews of every Pelican pen with the exception of the M1000. Maybe one day I will be able to change that. But I've talked about the Pelican a ton. And sort of similar to the Lummi 2000, there's not much more I can say about it. So I guess that's kind of why-ish. And then the final fountain pen that I used to talk about relentlessly, I also stopped talking about because, once again, general feedback, and not everyone, but general feedback was, we get it, you like it, stop talking about it. Yeah. The Pilot Custom 823 fountain pen. This is the amber finish. I also own the smoke finish, the vacuum fill pen. Oh, so satisfying. With my adored Mont Blanc James Purdy & Sons single malt. You all know that I love to keep in there. This is just a gorgeous, gorgeous gold nib. It's a medium nib. Just stunning. I've talked ad nauseum to this pen. And why have I stopped? Well, like I said, you guys mostly told me to. And in fairness, I did tend to stop talking about this one quite as much when I picked up the Pilot Custom Heritage 912, which I think I also have in and around here. Yes. With the Falcon nib, because I talk about this one quite a bit too. Which also has a gold nib pen with the Flex Falcon nib and the ebonite feed. Oh, that ebonite feed, baby! The reason why I'm adored with this one is because I like the Flex option, just for the comfort of feeling when I write. Plus, that ebonite feed makes it just stupid wet. Whoa! But before I got that one and started talking at length about that one, this was the one. And this was the one that I said for the longest time would probably be my favorite forever. And it's oh gosh. It's so hard to quantify what is my favorite pen, because favorite pens do tend to suffer recency bias a little bit. Like obviously you all know that I have just adore Benu fashion right now. These are actually the only two pens I have inked up right now, my Briolette and my Venus Talisman. And you know that I'm obsessed. It's really hard to keep it all together. Oh, this is a sexy face. I'm gonna make that my thumbnail. So it's really difficult to keep recency bias out of what would be considered my favorite. But these 5 fountain pens are still, without a doubt, I will pretty much have forever. Like I said, I cannot see myself ever selling these, with the exception of the 3776, only if I am able to get the tortoise shell. And even then, I still might keep it, to be fair. But I cannot see myself getting rid of anything else, because it just simply is stunning. Stunning. And there's a reason why these are some of the longest, like, pens that I've had for the longest in my entire life, because they're amazing. I just don't talk about them as often anymore. And it just kind of happens, you know? Like I said, videos just tend to have recency bias because the algorithm likes that. But let me know if you want me to talk about any one of those 5. Let me know if you have been watching my content for a really long time and you remember a different pen that I used to talk about all the time, but haven't really done so lately. Drop a comment down below. What are some pens that you've had forever that you just not really take for granted anymore that you have them, but sort of. Let me know in the comment section down below. If you haven't yet, please subscribe. New videos come out every Monday and Friday and the occasional Tuesday. Do hit that like button. Guys, you have no idea how much the algorithm depends on that stinking button. And while I dislike having to ask you, it does, believe it or not, make a difference. So please hit that like button. And then check out the description for a link to my Patreon account if you want to help support me and what I do here. But as always, thank you for watching. If you've made it, 16 minutes in, you are the reason I make these videos. And as always, I'll see you next time.